The Academy had no mercy for rule breakers, until the human rule breaker saved everyone. The pen was the only thing keeping me honest. Not the 5 alien judges staring down from a bench so high it could double as a cliff. Not the charges being read aloud in 3 languages, 2 of which had more syllables than I had excuses. Not the fact that my continued presence on this station, and maybe my planet's continued presence in the Concord, was being decided in a room that smelled like ozone and bureaucracy. The pen. It had rolled off my table during intake 40 minutes ago. Nobody picked it up. The floor had a 0.3-degree tilt. I had measured it with my eyes because I had nothing else to do, and the pen had been traveling 6 inches across polished alien stone while 3 species decided what to do with me. I watched it reach the wall. The head adjudicator, a Cathali named Vendorith whose species communicated partly through color shift, was currently a shade I had privately labeled bureaucratic beige. It meant displeasure. I had learned their color language in my 2nd week, which was also the week I had committed my first violation. Cadet Marcus Vell, Vendorith said. Violation of Engagement Simulation Protocol 7C, the prescribed 9-move defensive formation, was abandoned in favor of an unauthorized 2-move solution. Both teams running the 9-move solution did not make it, I said. My team did. The solution was outside prescribed parameters. The outcome was not. The color deepened, something closer to burnt orange, not good. Violation of Xenobiological Lab Containment Order. You released a Class 3 specimen without authorization. It was dying in those containment conditions. I checked the biology, fixed the environment, and it lived. That took 11 minutes and a supply closet. It was unauthorized. It was alive. I could feel the room shift. Not dramatically, these beings were too composed for drama, but the way air shifts before something decides. Sarath Ven was standing 3 meters to my left, top of the cohort, Cathali, 7 fingers, 7 feet, and the kind of calm that comes from never once in your life having done anything wrong. He had requested to be present as senior cadet witness. The Academy allowed it. I was not sure if that was a formality or a preview. The human is a liability, Sarath Ven said. His voice had no edges. It was just information. His presence reflects on the Concord's decision to admit his species. That decision is already contested. I picked up the pen. I put it in my pocket. Noted, I said. The warning was clean and simple. 1 more incident and I was done. Earth's provisional Concord membership would be flagged. A formal notation would follow me out the door. The Academy's patience was not a resource I could keep drawing on. I walked out into a corridor made of materials that had not existed when my planet was still writing things on stone, under lights calibrated for 7 different kinds of eyes, past 30 cadets from 19 species who went quiet when I passed, and I thought about Danny. She had circled the recruitment notice in actual marker, on my actual wall, in our actual apartment in Chicago. She had pressed the marker cap back on and said, "You are too smart to stay small," like it was obvious, like it was settled. She had been right. I was going to be fine. I had done stupider. The month I spent following every rule was the worst stretch I had experienced since Chicago, and Chicago had set a bar that should have been impossible to clear. My simulation scores dropped. The instructors noted this with the kind of clinical precision that told me they were not surprised. The prescribed solutions were not designed for my kind of mind. My kind of mind looked at a problem and thought, yeah, but what if we just, and then the protocol said no, and I stopped, and the simulation team died because we waited 3 beats too long for structural clearance. I watched Sarath Ven run the same simulations, and it was like watching architecture move. Every decision inevitable, every sequence airtight. He left nothing to chance because he had anticipated and eliminated chance before it could arrive. I watched him and thought, What happens when chance shows up anyway? I did not say it. Instructor Feval's seminar on contact history was the fourth Tuesday of that month. I knew it was coming. I had prepared the way you prepare for something that is going to hurt regardless, methodically, without feeling, with the specific goal of getting through it without leaving evidence. Feval walked through the timeline, the Skethri approach, Earth's vessels failing to follow first contact protocols, the signal misfire read as a hostile gesture. An instructive case, Feval said, in the tone of someone reading atmospheric data, of what occurs when protocol gaps are not remedied before contact situations arise. 41 Skethri, 11 humans. One of them had signed up because her little brother needed to believe something was worth the effort. I was looking at the pen in my pocket. I said nothing. Sarathven glanced at me once. Something moved in those color gradient eyes, not sympathy exactly, but a kind of recognition, like he had registered weight. Then it was gone and he was looking at the display again, and Feval was moving to the next slide. That night I sat on the observation deck, 4 moons, none of them mine. I did the math I always did. Follow every rule, climb slowly, maybe reach a position where that kind of thing happens less often. Or be myself, get expelled, go back to a planet one diplomatic incident away from being locked out of everything that matters. I went to bed. I followed the rules. My ranking dropped 2 more places. Sarathven said nothing about it. That was somehow the worst part. Each simulation felt like wearing someone else's shoes. The fit was close enough that you could walk, but wrong in every step. I knew what the protocols were designed to do. I understood the logic underneath them. The problem was not that I thought they were built badly. The problem was that they were built for situations that stayed inside the lines, and every time I looked at a simulation scenario, my mind went straight to the one thing that was not inside any line. The gap, the variable nobody had anticipated, the place where the prescribed solution ended and the actual problem kept going. I kept my mouth shut. I ran the protocol. I watched my team take the slower, safer, approved path and arrive at outcomes that were technically acceptable and, in my gut, completely wrong. There was a cadet named Owen Grast, a Pelosian in my combat theory cohort, who had noticed the change in me. Owen was 6 feet wide at the shoulders, looked like a wall that had developed opinions, and had the observational instincts of someone who had grown up in environments where reading a room was a survival skill. He found me in the equipment bay one evening, while I was running maintenance checks on a systems panel I had no reason to be touching. "You look like a person who has lost an argument with himself," Owen said. "I am following the rules," I said. "Yes," he said, "that is what I mean." He sat on a crate and watched me work for a moment. "On my world," Owen said, "there is a word for someone who knows the right answer and does not say it. It is not a kind word." "What does it translate to?" He thought about it. "Roughly, the one who chose the safe cage over the open field." I kept working on the panel. I did not say anything, but I thought about it for the rest of the week. The thing about the academy was that it was not wrong. That was the hardest part to sit with. The protocols existed because someone, at some point, had made the wrong call and paid a price that could not be undone. The rules were built from failures. They were the accumulated record of everything that had gone badly so that the next generation would not have to repeat it. I respected that. I genuinely did. The part I could not reconcile was this. A protocol designed from the failures of the past is still a record of the past. It cannot anticipate the failure that has not happened yet. And my mind, for better or worse, was a machine for finding the failure that had not happened yet. I was not built to live inside a record of the past. I was built to read what was right in front of me. The simulation that ended things was a rescue operation. 12 cadets trapped, Cave-in protocol required sequential extraction following full structural clearance. 40 minutes minimum. Standard. Optimal. Prescribed. I looked at the structural readouts for 8 seconds. There was a load-bearing redundancy on the eastern wall. If you pulled the 2 pinned cadets from the west at the same time instead of one at a time, the whole extraction ran in 9 minutes. 0 casualties. Clean solution. It was completely outside protocol. I looked at the readouts for another 2 seconds. Extract west simultaneously, I said into the command channel. 9 minutes, everyone out. The simulation officer looked at me the way you look at someone who shows up to a formal dinner, with their hands still dirty from doing something useful. The solution was outside prescribed parameters. Yeah, I said, we have been here before. The tribunal was faster this time. No lengthy deliberation. Sarath Ven was present again, required procedure for senior cadet witness. The adjudicator read the decision with the efficiency of someone who had already written it before the hearing started. Dismissal, effective in 6 hours. Earth's provisional status flagged for review. A formal notation. Humanity's first Academy cadet removed for systemic inability to operate within institutional frameworks. They did not say his kind could not follow rules. They did not have to. I packed with the practiced efficiency of someone who had moved too many times to be sentimental about it. I knew what was mine. Everything else got folded, set aside, and left for whoever came next. Sarath Ven appeared in the doorway. Not required, not protocol. The Eastern Wall solution, he said. I ran the math afterward, it was correct. I know. It was also not permitted. I know that too. He stood there for a moment. 7 feet of someone who had never once in his life made the wrong decision for the right reason. His colors were steady and unreadable. I do not understand you, he said, not as an insult, as a fact that clearly bothered him in the specific way that an unexplained variable bothers someone who is very good at math. No, I said, you do not. I picked up my bag. The alarm went off. Not the drill alarm, not the simulation one, the other alarm, the one I had only ever heard in archival recordings, that the instructors called a theoretical contingency, that the probability models rated at less than 0.003% per academic cycle. A real one. I set my bag down. Not my problem, I thought. I picked the bag back up. I set it down again. Yeah, it was my problem. What was coming was called a Vthric cascade event. I had read about it once, in an elective module on adversarial system design that exactly 3 cadets had signed up for. Me, a Pelori exchange student named Grev who had since graduated, and Cadet Lily Wren from Earth, the second human in the program, 2 years behind me, who took notes in 5 different colors, and had once corrected an instructor so precisely that the instructor updated the module. A cascade event was not an accident. It was a weapon. Specifically, it was a weapon designed to feed on organized, systematic responses. Every protocol action you ran became fuel. The more structured your reaction, the deeper the cascade burned. It was designed to destroy institutions by turning their own discipline against them. From the corridor, I could see Sarath Ven already commanding the emergency response. 7-point evacuation, sealed corridors per regulation, fire suppression systems activated in the prescribed sequence. Beautiful, correct, perfect. And the worst possible response to what was actually happening. The suppression system activation had triggered a power reroute that deepened the breach. The sealed corridors, the protocol-designated safe zones, had trapped 60 cadets in the lower labs. The evacuation sequence was moving people toward the failure point because the failure point was inside the designated evacuation path, and nobody had checked, because why would you? The path had been validated for 300 years. The cascade was eating them alive with their own playbook. I watched Serathven's colors shift to something I had never cataloged before. Not beige, not orange, something without a name in any color language I had learned. He was following the rules. The rules were making it worse, and he did not know how to stop following the rules because he had never, not once in his life, done anything else. I walked past him into the emergency systems bay. "Vel," he said, "you are expelled." "Yeah," I said, and started working. What followed was not heroic in any form that looks good on a formal record. It was 6 violations in the first 4 minutes, and I was counting because counting was the only thing keeping my hand steady. I cross-wired 2 emergency systems that had a hard prohibition on interfacing. The Academy's engineers had separated them for efficiency reasons. Those reasons were completely valid under normal conditions. These were not normal conditions. The feedback loop I built from the illegal connection bought 11 minutes of cascade suppression. It ran hot and wrong, and it ran, which was the only thing that mattered. I opened a sealed corridor without clearance. Behind it were 43 cadets, including 12 from the lower labs who had been cut off from every designated escape route. I moved them through a maintenance shaft rated for equipment transport only. 3 of the larger cadets, Owen Grast and 2 Vthric, should not have fit. They fit. Physics is negotiable when the alternative is something worse. I rerouted power through a tertiary grid that had not been used in 2 decades because its efficiency rating was 14% below the Academy's operational standard. It ran hot. It pulled from sectors that were not supposed to be touched. It kept the lights on in the lower labs long enough for the last group to navigate out. I found Lily Wren on sublevel 4 with 8 first-year cadets from 4 different species, all of them standing in the doorway with their emergency checklists open, and their eyes doing the rapid scanning pattern that means someone is looking for something their training told them would be there, and it is not. I looked at them for 1 second. "Close the checklist," I said. "Tell me what is actually in front of you right now. What do you see?" A Kethali first year with unsteady hands said, "The left wall panel is warm. The right one is not." A Pelosian cadet named Cal Morrow said, "The floor has a vibration every 4 seconds." Lily said quietly, "The emergency lighting is cycling in a pattern. It is not random." I looked at the wall, the floor, the lights. "Follow the pattern," I said. "Left wall, then right corridor junction, then up. Go now." They went. It worked. There was a moment, deep in the last hour, when I was elbow-deep in a panel that no human hands were designed to reach, rerouting the final cascade node through a set of conduit pathways that an engineer would describe as creative, and a safety officer would describe with words I will not repeat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from that specific frequency of grief and adrenaline that I had only ever felt once before, in Chicago, on the night I received the notification. "Danny, I thought you see this." It was not a question. I did not stop moving. The node went dark. The cascade died. I sat on the floor of Corridor 7, back against the wall, and watched my hands stop shaking. 61 cadets, the labs, the infrastructure, the 300 years of validated evacuation paths that had, tonight, become a trap. All of it intact. Serathven found me there. He stood for a long moment, looking at the darkened cascade panel, at the cross systems still glowing with the illegal connection I had built, at the rerouted tertiary grid humming 2 levels below. "How did you know which rules to break?" he asked. I looked at him. "I did not," I said. "I knew which ones were worth trying." He was quiet for a long time after that. The second tribunal was in the same room, same floor, same faint smell of ozone, different energy entirely. 3 adjudicators had become 7. There were representatives from 4 conquered species I had not seen in that room before. An Earth liaison named Nora Fitch sat at the end of the bench looking like she had not slept in 30 hours, and was actively choosing not to make eye contact with me, because eye contact would require her to have feelings about this, and Nora Fitch was working very hard at being a diplomat right now. My original dismissal charges were technically still active. Cadet Vel, the lead adjudicator, began. "It is just Marcus," I said. "I am still expelled, correct, so probably drop the cadet." The lead adjudicator's color shifted. I had a name for this one. Impending migraine ochre. Vendorith, who had presided at my first tribunal, sat to the left. He had added a second color layer I had not seen him use before, something patient and watchful underneath the formal presentation, like he already knew where this was going but needed the official record to catch up with him. The formal charges were read into the record, violation of this, violation of that. The list was thorough. I had been busy. What followed was 40 minutes of institutional language, doing the slow work of processing something it did not have a category for. 7 representatives from 4 species arguing about whether last night's outcome justified last night's methods, whether the methods themselves were admissible as evidence of capability, or only as evidence of disorder, whether a human who could not follow rules was an asset or a liability to an institution that had run on rules for longer than my planet had been keeping written history. I stopped following the language around minute 20. I watched Sarath Ven. He was standing at formal attention, on my behalf, not as a required witness this time but as an advocate, a word that in Kethali institutional law carried weight roughly equivalent to placing your entire record on the table and saying, "Whatever happens to this person, put my name next to it." He was putting his record on the table, for me. The argument he made was not that I was a good person. It was not an appeal to last night's outcome or to anything emotional at all. It was something colder and, I thought, more honest than either of those things. The Vthric cascade event was a designed attack on systematic thinking, Sarath Ven said. It was, specifically, a weapon built to defeat institutions like this one. We survived it because one individual in this academy was not purely systematic. If we dismiss him, we are choosing to remain a monoculture of method. We are choosing to be defeatable by the same weapon a second time. I do not recommend this. He sat down. The room was quiet in the way rooms get when something true has just been said, and nobody is quite ready to answer it yet. I looked at the pen in my pocket. I turned it over once. They reinstated me. It was not gracious. It came with conditions, a new operational framework, a formal note stating that my methods would be studied rather than adopted, language engineered so the Academy was not endorsing chaos but merely acknowledging a new variable. My official classification going forward, non-standard operational asset. I had no idea if that was a compliment or just a very formal way of saying they did not know what to do with me. I decided it was not an insult. Nora Fitch caught me in the corridor outside. She was carrying a tablet and a cup of something that smelled like coffee and exhaustion in equal measure. "You understand what last night did for Earth's provisional status," she said quietly. "I understand what losing 61 cadets would have done for it," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she did something I had not expected from a diplomat in a professional setting. She nodded, not as a representative, as a person. "Your sister would have been proud," she said. I did not say anything. She walked away. I stood in the corridor for a moment, under lights calibrated for 7 different kinds of eyes, and I let it land. Danny had wanted this. Not the explosion, not the crisis, not the 3 tribunals and the close calls and the month of following rules that never fit. She had wanted the part underneath all of that. The part where her little brother stood somewhere that mattered and did something that was real. She had circled a notice in marker. She had been right. That afternoon, Sarath Ven fell into step beside me in the eastern corridor. We walked for a stretch without talking, which was new between us and felt, surprisingly, like progress. 3 months ago, he had treated me like a recurring systems error. 2 months ago, like a problem worth observing. Last night, like a variable he had not accounted for but was reconsidering. "You are going to keep breaking rules," he said. "Probably. You are going to make my career extremely complicated." "Almost certainly." He was quiet for another 20 paces, long enough that I thought the conversation was done. "My species has a concept," he said finally. "There is no clean translation into any language the Academy uses. Roughly, the mistake that teaches the wall it was a door." I thought about that. "Is that a compliment?" "It is a category," he said. "We do not give it often." "How often?" He glanced at me sideways. "You are the first individual from another species to receive it." I did not have anything to say to that, so I said nothing. We kept walking. Later, Lily Wren found me in the equipment bay where I was cataloging the repairs I had made, half of which were already being formally reviewed as potential emergency supplements to the standard protocol. That was a sentence I was going to need several days to fully process. She sat on a crate and watched me work for a while. "Cal Morrow wants to know if you will run a seminar," she said. "On what?" "On how you think." I stopped. I looked at her. She had her 5-color notes open on a tablet, and she was watching me with the specific expression of someone who has already made a decision and is waiting patiently for you to arrive at the same one. "I do not follow a system," I said. "I know," she said. "That is the seminar." I thought about it. I thought about the 9 minutes in the rescue simulation that nobody had given me credit for. The 43 cadets through the maintenance shaft. Cal reading the floor vibration and saying it out loud when his checklist gave him nothing. Lily following the light pattern. 8 first-year cadets from 4 species who closed their checklists and used their eyes because someone told them it was all right to do that. Maybe there was something there worth passing on. Maybe that was what Danny had been pointing at all along, not just that I was capable of more, but that capability only means something when it does not stop with you. "Fine," I said, "but it is not going to look like a normal seminar." Lily smiled, I assumed. Owen Grast appeared in the bay doorway a few minutes later, apparently having followed Lily at a distance in the way. Large people sometimes follow conversations they want to be part of but will not admit to. "I want to be in the seminar," he said. "You do not even know what it is yet," I said. "It involves not dying," he said. "Last night confirmed my interest in the subject." I looked at him. I looked at Lily. I looked at the equipment bay around me, at the crossed-wired panel still tagged for formal review, at the tertiary grid connection that an engineer named Ben Holt had spent the morning photographing from 6 different angles for a report he was apparently very excited about. Something was starting here. I could feel the shape of it even if I could not name it yet. That night, I went back to the observation deck. 4 moons, same as always. None of them mine, but I had stopped needing them to be mine somewhere in the last few months without noticing exactly when. I talked to Danny the way I always did, not out loud, not formally, just in the direction of things she would have wanted to see. I told her about the cascade node, about the maintenance shaft and Owen Grast fitting through it on sheer determination, about a 7-foot alien who had put his career record on the table for a human he had spent 3 months treating like a recurring error, who had told me I was a category his species had never assigned to another species before. I told her about the pen. I had kept it through the whole thing, found it in my pocket during the second tribunal, turning it over without thinking, the way you reach for something familiar when the room gets heavy. It was just a pen. Cheap, half-dried, the kind you buy in a set of 12 and lose 11 of before the month is out. It had traveled 6 inches across an alien floor while the Conquered decided what to do with me, and I had picked it up, and somewhere along the way it had become the thing I held onto when everything else was moving too fast. I set it on the railing of the observation deck. I watched to see which way it rolled. It rolled toward the edge, stopped just before. That felt about right. I picked it up, put it back in my pocket, looked out at the 4 moons and the hard dark between them, all that empty space that Danny had wanted me to be brave enough to cross. I was still here. Tomorrow I would probably break 3 more rules and save something else by accident, and Sarathvin would add a new notation to his file, and Nora Fitch would stop making eye contact with me again, and the Academy would need another 3 meetings to decide what to do with a human who could not be categorized and could not be dismissed and kept showing up anyway. The Conquered had admitted humanity on a provisional basis. They were going to need to update the paperwork. I was not going to make it easy for them. I was not going to make it anything other than honest. Danny had circled a notice in marker and said, "You are too smart to stay small." She had not said, "Follow the rules and wait your turn and hope the institution notices you eventually." She had said, "Go." So I went. And I was going to keep going, one duct tape solution at a time, until the Academy ran out of categories for me, or the universe ran out of problems I had no business solving. I was betting on the universe running out first.